Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 144 of Petey's Awesome Guest Battle. Now, before we introduce tonight's legendary guest star, I would like to introduce tonight's co-host for this evening. First off, Mr. Christopher Petey.
Hey, yo.
Good to see you. Introducing tonight, we have from the land from down under, Miss Jessie Devine.
Hi.
Oh, it's a pleasure to see you, Jess.
Same.
Now, before I introduce tonight's, like I said, legendary name, I would like to read this gentleman's accolades. And trust me, this man is a jack of all trades. He has accolades in a lot. First off, he's not only a legendary actor and 90s icon who has starred in many TV and film projects such as Parker Lewis Can't Lose, Stargate SG-1s, and of course, recently the 2024 film Deadly Justice. He's also an accomplished producer, producing many projects such as Dead Man's Hands and Starvin', with, of course, Married with Children's own David Faustino, as well as being a photographer and a accomplished screenwriter and writer who has written several books, including the latest, Creating a Character for the Stage or Life. I would also say, too, in addition to that, this gentleman is a multi-time award winner, as he has won the Primetime Emmy Award for twice for 3 different years. In 92 and 93 for Parker Lewis Can't Lose, and of course, in 1989 for his project I Know My First Name is Steven. And he has also won the 2023 Breaking Film TV Film Festival for Best Actor for his work in Black Water Blues. My guest at this time is the star of Parker Lewis Can't Lose, Corky himself, Mr. Corin Nemec. Corin, welcome. How are you today?
What's up, buddy? That was a heck of an introduction. I appreciate it. That was fantastic. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and thank you for your co-hosts and your lady down under there. I've been to Australia, geez, probably 26 times, and I've loved every single time I've been.
Cool. And I just want to say too that, you know, growing up watching Fox, there's 2 things, well, 3 things. My family and I, but my father and I every Sunday would always watch Parker Lewis Can't Lose, Married with Children, and of course The Simpsons.
Oh yeah, man, those were good, and I hope you didn't miss In Living Color as well.
Of course not. I didn't forget that. Herman's Head.
Had a good show.
We grew up with the whole thing.
Yeah, Fireman Bill. That was a classic.
Now, I want to bring, and this is going to lead to the first question I have for you, sir, and that is, basically, you mentioned you moved in an interview, in a recent interview I saw, you mentioned you moved to LA in the 1980s, in which you had, you know, some first projects such as, you know, you worked on Sidekicks, you appeared on Webster as Nikki Papadopoulos, pardon me, and of course, you've also worked on The Cadets as well. My question is, would you consider those your big break and or start into acting, or would you say Parker Lewis was your first big break and start?
I'd say actually my first big break was playing Jeff Bridges' son Noble Tucker in the movie Tucker. That was shortly after I did that episode of Sidekicks with my good friend Ernie Reyes Jr., which I was so excited to do Sidekicks because I was a big fan of Buck Rogers that Gil Gerard starred in, and so that was really awesome for me. And after that, after Tucker, I went on to do Webster for its final season, and then did a TV special for Eddie Murphy Productions called What's Alan Watching that was a really big kind of cult hit. And there was actually that show that got me Parker Lewis later on. But really, it was I Know My First Name is Steven that kind of launched me and catapulted me into a whole new level in my career because of that Emmy nomination I got for that. And you know, that really set the tone for me for my future, to be able to bounce in between comedy and drama, you know, which was always very important to me to continue doing dramatic roles, especially once I got Parker Lewis. I was very concerned about being typecast as that type of character, and especially as a comedic actor. So every hiatus, I would do a different dramatic miniseries. I mean, a dramatic movie of the week. Which the first one I did was called For the Very First Time, and then I did one called My Son Johnny with Rick Schroeder, and then on my third hiatus I did a movie called Life Force Experiment that was a really wonderful drama with Donald Sutherland, and what an amazing actor to work with.
Very cool. And I just want to also ask as well too. Like you've also done, producing roles, and some of the stuff that you've produced, of course, I mentioned before was Dead Man Hand, and of course Starvin, which you worked with David Faustino. Talk about memories of producing those projects.
Yeah, well, I was actually just a writer on Dead Man's Hand. I wasn't actually working as a producer on that one. I did produce a number of or co-produce a number of sci-fi films. That was a lot of fun. Doing Starving though, which was a relatively short-lived web series for Sony Television that aired on Crackle. I don't know if we offended everybody over at Sony TV or something, but after getting a groundbreaking 15 million views in about 3.5 weeks, they decided that they wanted to take the show off of their platform, which was very shocking to all of us because it was doing gigantic numbers for them, and really was a great launch for Crackle. Even though Crackle already existed, it was a great launch once Sony Television bought it. But working on it, I got to work with some great friends of mine. Me and David Faustino had known each other since the '80s, and Sam Cass was also a writer producer on that with us, and he was one of the writer producers on Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm and shows like that. And he was just fantastic to work with. And another very close friend of mine and writing partner of mine, Todd Bringawat, was on that. And just getting to work with close friends like that it's magical. It changes the dynamics of the whole experience when working. That's my corgi in the background barking. He always wants something. But yeah, producing is a different beast. It's a whole different animal. It takes a lot of focus and concentration, a lot of hustle, a lot of putting puzzle pieces together that don't necessarily fit. Deadly Justice, I chose not to take the lead role in that one as a producer and writer on that, because I realized in the past how busy producing is, and I needed to have more time. So I ended up taking kind of the secondary role in that, which was beneficial to me. And we had a great cast in that, really, really good cast. I was very happy with how that turned out. It's on Tubi now if anybody wants to see it. But it was a wonderful experience too. We shot that in Mississippi, the same place we shot Blackwater Blues.
Cool. And before we get to the Jess, before we get to your question, I just want to say a couple of things on Mr. Nemec. First of all, I just want to applaud you also because you mentioned also, like, as you mentioned here and in the previous interviews, how you always like to stay fresh after going on hiatus. So that's why you never like change you always want to change the genre up to that way you don't stick to one topic. Like what you did with Park Lewis, after you were on hiatus with Park Lewis, you went to a different project with a totally different genre. So much kudos to you for that, sir.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yes. Idle hands are the devil's helper.
Of course. And you're a man of so many titles, that, and also, of course, you're a jack of all trades because you did producing, you did writing, of course, acting. Your question.
Yes. Memories of your audition for Parker Lewis Can't Lose?
Well, I got very, very lucky on that. I was talking about that television special I did called What's Alan Watching, and it was with Eddie Murphy Productions. It had an incredible cast. Fran Drescher played my sister in it, and Peter Michael Getz and Barbara Barry, and obviously Eddie Murphy was in it. There was Pauly Shore was in it as kind of my nemesis, and it was just an incredible show. And my character was somewhat similar to Parker Lewis in that, and it was beneficial to me because at the time that we were making that at CBS, and when it aired on CBS, Clyde Phillips, one of the creators of Parker Lewis, along with Lon Diamond and Robert Lloyd Lewis, predominantly Lon Diamond, Clyde Phillips was over at CBS and was the creator and producer of Houston Nights for them, which was a short-lived series back in the '80s. And he was a huge fan of What's Alan Watching, and had been told by CBS that they wanted a half-hour teen-driven comedy. And so he came up with the idea for Parker Lewis back then, but CBS ended up not picking it up, so the rights reverted back to him. And then a number of years later, when Fox Television did their full lineup of shows, he pitched it over to them, and that was after Ferris Bueller's Day Off came out. So I think that the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off assisted in the sell of Parker Lewis Can't Lose, but oddly enough, a lot of people will be surprised to know that Parker Lewis Can't Lose was created 2 years or so before Ferris Bueller's Day Off ever came out as a movie. So it actually predated Ferris Bueller, because a lot of people make that comparison.
Interesting. And Chris, you have back-to-back questions. Your questions for Mr. Nemec.
Well, Mr. Nemec, as I geek out wearing my Parker Lewis shirt here.
I applaud it too. I applaud it.
Me too.
So I actually took the liberty to binge a lot of season 3, which isn't on DVD. Had to really fish for it on YouTube. And I suppose it really wasn't horrible. There was the drift towards the Melrose Place and 90210 elements that were rather reminiscent of the 80s.
Season 3?
Yeah, season 3.
Yeah.
And the cartoon surrealism drifted, but it wasn't completely gone. And so it was still okay for what it was, I thought. And
yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
One thing that really bothered me, that I found most jarring, though, was the disappearance of Frank Lemmer, Todd Johnson's character.
Yes.
What were the writers thinking taking him off? Because he was inarguably the best part of the show.
Yes, I got to tell you, oddly enough, it had nothing to do with the writers and producers of the show. It had to do with the executives over at Fox. Fox had been sold by Rupert Murdoch, not the Fox News, but Fox Television had been sold by Rupert Murdoch to I can't remember who bought it, but once it was sold, they brought in a whole new slate of executives over at Fox. And they were looking at our show and looking at 90210, and I think Melrose Place may have just started out around that time too. And they were just looking at numbers in terms of viewership and the cost of the budget. And our budget was about the same and sometimes more than an episode of 90210, and our ratings weren't quite as high. But also, we had a tougher time slot, and it was not taking into account, they were still basing it on Nielsen ratings, and it wasn't taking into account all of the college kids who were watching it, and they don't have Nielsen boxes on their televisions. And a lot of the families with Nielsen boxes had a separate television for their kids in another room by the the early 90s. It wasn't like a one television household any longer by then. So I don't think the ratings were fair, because in my experience traveling and doing promotional stuff for Parker Lewis, the response was out of this world. There are a lot of fans out there for it. So they're the ones who wanted to change it up and to make it a little bit more 90210-ish. And it was their decision to get rid of the character of Lemmer. And Clyde Phillips and Lon Diamond and Robert Lloyd Lewis and the whole team over there fought tooth and nail, and to keep it the same. Had they involved me in it, I would have tried my best to keep it the same as well. I wasn't involved in that fight directly by any means. In fact, it was just sort of thrown on me at the last minute that these changes were happening. Had they included me in that fight, I would have staged a walkout, man, because it really was a massive downturn for not only our ratings, but the enthusiasm for the show, and how much fun it was to make really took a turn for the worse too. It was so much fun to make. It was very long hours, but the show itself was just groundbreaking in so many ways, and the episodes were outrageous, and the more outrageous they were, the more fun it was to make. So that was just the politics of Hollywood, when you get a bunch of suits who have nothing but like a law degree and no creative bones in their bodies. That's what happens when they get involved in the creative process. They ruin it.
Most definitely. And I often had this vision, I guess, placed in my own headcanon, that since Lemmer was supposed to be a senior in season 2, he would have actually already graduated, because it's another school year after that. I suppose there's a limited feel for continuity, rather similar to The Simpsons. But at the same time, I could have actually envisioned him having joined the Marine Corps after high school.
Lemmer and the Marines, man. That's a show in and of itself. Lemmer
have been a
joins
great
the
spin-off.
army. That would have been, you know what? I would have watched it. That would have been hilarious.
He probably would have made a very fine, very totalitarian PG.
Yep.
And yeah, I could definitely see him going into officer candidate school later on and really just being like a brutal authoritarian leader, rather cruel at that. And I suppose that there might be a few episodes, maybe down the line, where you have to like focus on how to stifle a coup against him or something like that.
I think Lemmer most likely would have like would have left the army and moved to Russia.
Possibility is there. I mean, back then it was just the Russian Federation, so it's not the Russia we know today.
No, I mean it fell in '89, but it was certainly in tatters by the early '90s. That's for sure.
For sure, for sure. Although, come to think of it, hindsight, I wonder how he would have done if he actually moved over to the Russian military.
In all likelihood, he would be the he'd be the Putin he'd be the Putin today. It'd be President Lemmer.
Corin, you could have done a joke like if they did like a Putin joke. You could say he's really Putin us on.
Yes, exactly.
He's Putin us on. Chris, you had another question.
So my other question here, looking back on your time playing Parker Lewis, what are some of your favorite memories from the show, and do you have any fun stories to share?
You know, I'd say my favorite memories, you know, working on the show really was after when they would finish editing an episode. I had a contractual agreement with them that they would supply me with a VHS copy of every single episode as soon as it was finished before it went on to before it was aired, and I would get to go home and watch the episode, and I would sit up in my room all by myself, and I would watch every episode of Parker Lewis before it aired. And I absolutely was as big of a fan of the show as anybody else was. I didn't really watch it as if it was me in the show. I watched the whole show. You know, I wasn't watching out of some kind of ego trip or anything like that. I was watching because I absolutely loved the show, and I loved you know, everything that we were doing with it. And as far as other parts of the show that were such a great time for me was really working with the cast and the directors and the whole crew, even all of the background artists. We kept a lot of the same background artists for all 3 seasons, so it really became a family atmosphere, which was very important because it was very long hours, very long hours. On average, we were 16 hours a day, sometimes 18, 20. And in fact, we did a 22, 23 hour day one time working that was absolutely brutal. One of the other funny things that happened on the show I'll share with you is, if anybody knows what craft service is a division of the crew where the individual takes care of all the snacks and the kind of treats and the coffee and all the stuff that you know you have in between working. And our first season, we had a craft service guy. I can't remember what his name was right now, but our first season, there was like never any food. There was never anything to snack on. I was constantly complaining about it. And the producers were like, look, this guy's got more than a big enough budget for this. You know, what are you complaining about? There should be tons down there. And I'm like, no, you know, it's not just me. I mean, everybody's unhappy about the situation. It's just, you know, we work such long hours. We got to keep ourselves going. And as it turned out, that the craft service guy was, because they used a lot of petty cash back then for craft service, he was gambling with the money and obviously losing. So he was gambling the craft service money away, which was tragic. And then in season 2, we got a new craft service guy, this guy named Dutch, who had a glass eye, and he was fantastic. There was always tons to eat there. but he was one of the dirtiest guys I've ever seen in my life. Like, hands always looked like he just finished working on a carburetor or something, you know. And one time I went over there and I was getting a cup of coffee, and he was slicing tomatoes, you know, for the breakfast bagels and stuff. And he had some pus dripping out of his glass eye. And I was like, "Hey, Dutch, you got a little, you know, pus dripping out of your eye there." He goes, wipes it like that, looks at it, rubs it into his hands, and goes back to cutting the tomatoes, man. So I had to, at that point, I was like, okay, I don't want to complain about this guy. I don't want to get him in trouble, but it's gone too far. And I went and told the executive producers about it, and they let him go from the show, but he still worked on the Fox lot. And he would ride by on his bicycle, and he'd always give me the old stink eye with his glass eye when he'd ride by the set and everything. And I'm like, Dutch, it's not my fault, man. You were just too dirty for the job. And then our third season, final season, we had this dude we called Rocker, and he was like this crazy heavy metal dude with just way longer hair than yours, these big muscles, and he was just like, you know, all into the heavy metal stuff. But he was just the most miserable guy you ever met. Absolutely miserable. And we learned very quickly, you never ask Rocker, you know, how his day went, because as soon as you asked him, he would go on like this 35-minute tirade about all of the things wrong with his life, all the problems he was having, and you just be stuck there just going, why did I ask him? So our craft service department there was pretty hilarious. And then I'll just share one other quick story with you. One of our directors, he'll remain nameless, he went on to some pretty big things during, I think it was season 2. We had an episode where my parents were they were boycotting something, or they were out. I forget what the episode was, but they had gone back to their 60s, like kind of, counter revolutionary against the system, thing. And they got arrested for protesting. And so we had a jail set that we had built for an episode earlier on, and they had dismantled the jail set, and it was kind of sitting off to the side on our soundstage. And on a Sunday night, one of our directors got a DUI, and he wasn't able to show up in the morning. And so they had one of our other regular directors come in and direct for him until about 3:00 in the afternoon, when he was able to get out of jail and get to set, and then pick up where the other one left off. And so I had the construction department rebuild the jail set around the area that he directed from, where he had like his video screen and all of that stuff. So when he got to set, he had to direct from jail for the rest of the day. It was brilliant.
Now I have to ask you this question, Mr. Nemec, because you brought up food, and we love to have fun on the show. So this is a fun question I ask to any guest that I have on here. And I have to ask you, you brought up the craft services thing, and where I'm going to get with this is that when I'm not a huge, almost military-like diet, there's times where I would fast until dinner time. When I'm not, I am an absolute foodie. And I was actually shocked when you mentioned the catering service, like on Parker Lewis, not being that great. So I was just curious to know and you've been part of many production companies, like as an actor in general, as a whole. So I was just curious to know, like, what was your favorite catering scene for different productions, and what was your favorite meal in catering?
That's a really easy one to answer. It was working on the movie Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes. John Badham was directing it. We had the most, I think they might have even been called 5-star catering. I can't remember, but we had the most incredible catering on that film. Every single day was just a gourmet spread. And every Friday they would do surf and turf, with big lobster tails and steaks, and just, the works, twice baked potatoes. And so, even because I didn't have a huge role in that film, but on Fridays, I would go to set even if I wasn't working that day. And I just show up, and they'd be like, hey, you're not on the schedule today. I'm like, yeah, but it's surf and turf.
That's awesome. And I gotta ask you this too as well, because Chris and you brought up military, of course, like in the previous questions. I want something. I have a question that's related to that kind of category and all. And that was memories of working on the 1988, the Cadets.
Yeah, the Cadets, man. That was actually before. I don't know if it aired in '88, but we shot that well before '88. Cadets was cool. It was just a pilot episode. Was with Soleil Moonfry, and it was right after Punky Brewster, canceled. It was the first thing she did after Punky Brewster. I think Jenny Lewis was in it, who's a successful singer now and all that. And I don't recall who else was in it. It was, we only did the one episode. It was a shame because it really, really was a good show. It could have been great. And for whatever reason they didn't pick it up. But I had a blast on that show. And then oddly enough, I went to real high school with Soleil Moonfry and Jenny Lewis as well. I went to a school for professional actors called Excelsior, and I was there with Mila Jovovich and Balthazar Getty and Christina Applegate, Johnny Whitworth, Seth Benzer, unfortunately passed away. He was the lead singer for Crazy Town, and a whole host of other people. Justin Warfield, who's the lead singer for She Wants Revenge, that great alternative group, was a school mate of mine, classmate of mine, and a bunch of other folks too. Names I just are slipping my mind, but it was a great time to be an actor, a young actor at that time. There wasn't as much competition as there is now. There was less platforming. There was no platforming. There was less networks and all of that. So the shows that were being watched by, generally speaking, a lot more people. It's you can be on a hit series today that's like a Paramount Plus original or an HBO original or a Showtime original or a Netflix or this, that, the other. And you can be on that show for years and walk around life and nobody knows who the hell you are, because each one has its own little market that it plays toward. And, so it's a very strange beast today, and I'm very fortunate and blessed to have survived that crossover between being what's considered a child actor into a young adult actor into an adult actor, and then writing and producing and still continuously acting. I have a number of films that came out more recently, a great one called Place of Bones, where I'm starring opposite Heather Graham and Tom Hopper. It's a wonderful Western that has a thriller and a kind of a horror twist to it. And a film that just came out a few days ago called I Feel Fine, that's on Prime Video and Apple TV, and it's a heavy drama about a difficult subject, teen suicide and whatnot. And it's a rough one, but it's wonderfully written and directed. Great little indie film that I co-produced and starred in as well. And then of course you mentioned Deadly Justice, which just it went on. We platformed it on a few other platforms, but we just moved it over to Tubi now, and it's playing very well on Tubi. So if anybody wants to go check it out there, they can check out Deadly Justice on Tubi.
I'm definitely checking that out. And I wanted to bring up this too, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, sir. But I just was wondering, Sidekicks. That was your first movie, right? Your first movie.
Yes, that was my first. I mean, it wasn't a movie; it was a TV series.
Pardon me. Sorry.
But yeah, it's fine. But yeah, that was my first TV series or show that was on. I had done previous to that. I had done a couple of commercials. My very first job I ever did was a Suzuki motorcycle commercial that aired during the 1986 Super Bowl. It was, and I was the star of the commercial, and that was a really big deal for me. My uncle was down in the Caribbean somewhere on vacation watching the Super Bowl at a bar, and suddenly my commercial came on. He's like, that's my nephew, and he's pointing at the TV. Everybody's like, who's this psychopath screaming at the television about his nephew? They didn't get it. He was probably drunk too, but that was my first brush with with any kind of of celebrity, if as it were.
I want to ask this too, Corin, and I speak for Chris and I when I ask this too. You were part of not only a part of the 90s histories, but you were also part of 90s Fox history. And in the past, The Simpsons has had crossovers with The Critic, other Fox shows like The Critic, X-Files, and even Family Guy, and also cameo appearances, not canon, but from Married with Children. My question is, and this is rhetorical, but I want to get your opinion on this too. But how in the world did we not see a Parker Lewis can't lose reference, or even a guest appearance on The Simpsons?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, they did do a Parker Lewis reference on Family Guy,
Yes.
which was
I did.
awesome. You know what I mean? That I think that to me, I wasn't a big Simpsons fan. Nobody bite my head off for that. I just didn't. I didn't jive with it. But Family Guy, I was a huge fan of, and American Dad as well. But so when they did that reference, I was like, come on, I've made it. And then they actually just showed a clip of Parker Lewis on the new Dexter series, which has the same creator, Clyde Phillips, that was the creator of Dexter, who was also one of the creators of Parker Lewis.
And I got to show you this too, Mr. Nemec, that my dad and I used to record Simpsons episodes back in the day, and one of the commercial breaks during The Simpsons featured a Parker Lewis episode. And this was from 1991, I believe, and the promo basically was at poolside, and then you see this woman, she takes off her sunglasses, she's sunbathing, and you see a big, heavy-set guy going to dive on the diving board, and he makes a big splash in a comedic effect.
Yeah.
Well, I'll show you that. When I find the link, I'm definitely going to show you that link.
Yeah, please do.
And another project you have done work on, and I mentioned it too in the top of our program, and that is you started in Stargate SG-1. And I want to get your memories of being on Stargate as Jonas Quinn and your audition for the show.
Yes, look, I'll start with the audition. It was one of those moments. I was in the right place at the right time. I was actually at the MGM corporate headquarters auditioning for something totally different, not SG-1 related at all. And the casting directors for Stargate SG-1 were walking by me when I was just kind of like going over my material for this other audition. And I had auditioned for them in the past for other things, and we just started having a chat. And they just mentioned, like, wow, we just got this breakdown for a new series regular on Stargate. It might be right for you. And I was sitting there going, hey, I'm an out of work actor. It sounds right to me, and or in between jobs actor. And so they called my agent, and my agent sent up some of my materials up to them, meaning some of the showcasing some of the acting that I've done in the past, other jobs I'd done, and they gave me the opportunity to do the final episode of season 5, which was that was really my audition. I didn't actually audition for the character. They gave me the job to play Jonas Quinn, but only in the one episode at the end of season 5. And they were going to base their determination on whether they brought that character over into season 6 or chose somebody totally different. So my audition was really on set, and it was, the pressure was on. I was like very, very stressed about it because series work is the best kind of work. It's the most steady work. I get the most out of it, the most consistency. It's just wonderfully relaxing to be working on a TV series. It's hard work, but it's great work. And so fortunately for me, I delivered in that final episode of season 5, and they brought me back for season 6 once the show moved over to Sci-Fi Channel. But when the show moved over to Sci-Fi Channel, they had a lot of money at stake. It was the most money Sci-Fi Channel had spent on anything, and they were very, very nervous about the show's success. And they were getting a lot of pushback from the Daniel Jackson fan base. So the whole time we were filming, none of the episodes had aired yet. And the whole time we were filming, Sci-Fi Channel was trying to figure out a way to get Daniel Jackson back as the series regular again, which I didn't know. So unfortunately for me, there was politics going on behind the scene that whole entire season, whether or not they were going to be keeping my character around. So by the time the show started airing, after we had shot probably over half of the season, they had already been doing backdoor negotiations to bring Daniel Jackson back, which is great for Michael Shanks. It was a boon for him because, like I said, there's nothing better than series work. So I found out shortly after we wrapped season 6 that they weren't bringing the character of Jonas back, and I was devastated. I got to tell you, I was really, really heartbroken because I loved doing the show so much, and fortunately they brought me back, for 3 episodes in season 6. I mean season 7, and they let me write the storyline for one of the episodes as well, which was really fun for me to do. But it was pretty brutal. As an artist, it was pretty brutal. But that's just part of the nature of the beast of Hollywood and the industry. It's a callous, cold world behind the scenes in the arts and entertainment world.
Like you said, hard work definitely does pay off, though. So I'm very glad that it worked out in the end, like in your best in your benefit.
Yeah, the one thing that it certainly did, I was totally unfamiliar with the international fandom and the convention circuit and sci-fi conventions and all these collector conventions and stuff like that. I was clueless about that whole world, and so I've gotten to travel all over. That's why I've been down to Australia so many times doing conventions and stuff down there, and all over Europe and different places and places that I just never would have been. Little towns that I never probably would have gone to or heard of. That's where they have conventions of this nature. And then I did a short run on season 6 of Supernatural as well, and that also helped. I ended up doing a lot of conventions because of Supernatural too, and that was cool, being a reoccurring character on Supernatural. And then I did I think it was 4 episodes of Ghost Whisperer as well. And then obviously being on the miniseries The Stand, was the Stephen King miniseries, the original one. All of those coupled together, along with the pop culture success of Parker Lewis, the convention circuit has been exciting for me.
So cool. And we're going to talk about the convention. We have a convention question for you too, but one of the questions I have for you too also is, did working on Stargate influence your love, or influence your love for sci-fi or science fiction, like as you were working on the show?
I mean, I'm from that young generation when Star Wars first came out, and I went and saw it. I must have been maybe 8 years old or so, and it was just absolutely a mind-blowing experience, because if you look at the movie Logan's Run, it was made at the same time that Star Wars was, and came out around the same time, and the difference in the special effects is just, you would think that Logan's Run was made 10 years before, but they were on the cutting edge of all of the techniques, the special effects techniques at that time. And I got to say, it was just absolutely incredible to have the opportunity to work on a sci-fi show later on, because the original Stargate movie I was a massive fan of. I was in love with the movie. I thought it was one of the best sci-fi movies made since Star Wars. To be honest, it was like Star Wars meets Indiana Jones, kind of. It was this really, really cool mashup of environments and everything. And I actually had gotten to do what I thought was going to be a very big, successful sci-fi movie in the late '80s called Solar Crisis, with Jack Palance and Peter Boyle and Charlton Heston and Tim Matheson, and myself. I was one of the main stars of it. And it was directed by Richard Sarafian, who was a fantastic director. And unfortunately, I don't know what it was about sci-fi at that time. It just was a lackluster performance in the theaters, and sort of disappeared. But it's a very well done sci-fi movie. It was in 1989. It was like a $50 million budget, which today would probably be at least a 90 some odd million dollar budget or higher. But in fact, it would probably be even higher than that, because everything's more expensive these days. But
of course, and of course, what was it like working with Richard Dean Anderson?
Richard's a great dude, as he likes to be called, Rick. He's a lot like his character. He's sarcastic and subtle. But he's very nice, very approachable, very kind, and very giving in the scenes. He wasn't he didn't want to have he was the star of the show, but he didn't care that he was the star of the show, if that makes sense, you know. And he didn't like to have all the dialogue and have all the attention and all of that. He really liked to push things out to other characters, and in fact was notorious for giving his dialogue away to other characters. He'd be reading a script and he'd be like, nah, this is better for, you know, for Carter to say. No, this is better for Teal'c to say. This is better for, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I don't know if maybe he just wanted less dialogue to remember, but you know, it was the kind of egoless approach to acting that all actors should aspire to, where you know, he's just there as a team player like everybody else.
Now, we also mentioned conventions as well. So you've been to like many conventions, sci-fi conventions. Though, do you have any fun stories to share about like your time during the sci-fi conventions?
I have one really good one. I went to a sci-fi convention. It was kind of before my episodes really aired on Stargate. I think only my episode of season 5 had aired yet, but it had been announced that I was a series regular on it for the next season. But I ended up going down and doing this it was like a Star Trek convention or somewhere outside of Orlando, and nobody knew why I was there. No, because they were all there for Star Trek. You know, I was the only person from Stargate that was there, and they didn't really recognize me from Stargate at that point anyways. But I was wearing this shirt. I don't know if at the Star Trek conventions, you know, you have the Klingons, and then you have the Trekkies. You know, you have the ones who wear the, you know, the suits and all of that of you know, like from the Enterprise
Like the red,
and everything.
the blue, the yellow.
Yeah, totally. And so, and they don't, ne'er do the two ever really meet. You know, there's this fun kind of playful separation of tribes, shall we say, you know. And the people who play the Klingons, they get really into it. They got the full makeup on, they make their own blood wine, you know, which I don't know what's in it, but they get drunk as Klingons. And so I was wearing this faux wrestling shirt that had like some wrestler on it who was like that. It said like blue collar wrestling, and I was going up to my room from the lobby, and I get out of the elevator, and I'm walking down this hall, and it's just full of people in their Star Trek outfits, and I'm like, yo, this is just wild. This whole group of Klingons were just standing there outside of a room, like having a room party, and there was this giant Klingon, like as big as Kubiak, you know, just huge, mammoth Klingon, and I'm walking by, and he turns around and he sees my shirt, and he's like, "You wrestle?" And he's talking in this deep, gravelly voice, and I'm like, no, it's just a shirt, you know, whatever. And he's like, you can't wear the shirt if you don't wrestle. And he came at me and wrestled me to the ground. I swear on my life, this guy was wrestling me to the ground, and I mean playfully, but still wrestling me to the ground. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I look up, and there's, you know, the people dressed you know, like they're coming off the deck of the Enterprise, and they're walking by, and I'm like, enemy, help here, can I? And they just walked by and looked at me like, whatever. And so I finally broke free from his grasp, his sweaty, clammy grasp, and I went running down the hallway back to the elevator. And it was like a horror movie. I get on the elevator, and he was so big and drunk, it took him a while to get up. And I'm on the elevator, and I'm like hitting the down button like as hard as I can. I'm like, come on, man, come on, close. And he's getting up, and he's lumbering towards the elevator, and he's like, you know, coming at me. And that door closed right at the, he's like, and it closed. And I was like, oh, whew, whew. And so I get back down to the lobby, and I'm like, I can't even go to the floor my room is on. What am I going to do here? You know, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just go kind of wander around the hotel a little bit. So I get off the elevator, and I hear somebody playing the guitar outside by the pool area, and this is my recollection, you know, of it. But I get around the corner, and I see, and it's the guy who played Flash Gordon in the Flash Gordon movie, and he's like in the old 80s one, the early 80s, late 70s one or whatever. And he's like sitting there jamming on the guitar, kind of singing a little bit. And I was like, oh, let me go check this out. I walk out there, and as sure as the sun will shine, he's playing to an entire hot tub full of drunk Klingons. They're all in the hot tub with their headgear on, their masks, all the face painted, everything, drinking this blood wine, drunk off their rockers, all in there, and they're just like, ah! And I'm like, they have kidnapped Flash Gordon. They've enslaved him, and now they have him entertaining them while they're in the hot tub. I was like, what planet have I been dropped off on here? I'm like, are all conventions this way? And I will tell you this, not all conventions are that way, but it was, I mean, it was a hell of an introduction to the con world. I'll tell you that much.
Incredible. Just incredible. Jess, you had a question.
Oh, all right. How did you approach playing a character like Jonas Quinn, who was from a different planet and had a unique cultural background?
That was a lot of fun for me. That was the part of the character that, to me, gave me the most kind of artistic excitement, because the one thing that I was considering, which they let me do quite a bit of for the first half of the season, and they kind of pulled the reins in, was my consideration was that the one thing that will be very different for him is the food that they eat on planet Earth, because that's the first thing that he's going to be in contact with on a regular basis, because we have to feed ourselves. And I kind of mocked up in my head that his home planet didn't have the best food, and so when he was there, he's got all these interesting tastes and flavors and snacks and drinks and all of this stuff. And so I was trying to incorporate as much of that as humanly possible, in order to add an extra layer to the scene work that I was doing. So there's a number of scenes where I'm like drinking my tea, or I'm like eating a banana, or I'm peeling an orange, or whatever else I'm doing, that wasn't necessarily in the script. And that was a lot of fun for me. We did an episode of called Shadow Play, where we go into a town, and it's the first time that Jonas is allowed off base, so to speak, and he ends up and they end up at a diner, and he's like dipping his onion rings in a milkshake, and he's first time tasting a ginger ale, and all of this cool fun stuff that I really enjoyed playing with. So that was the part of it that I liked most about being an alien on planet Earth.
Sweet. And I want to get your perspective on this too, because we saw in a previous interview that you did, though, like, and I absolutely respect and praise you for this tremendously. I was trying to find a proper word for this. Like, I was trying to give a compliment for this, but in a interview you did in the past, you mentioned how, like, as a producer, you always want to try to change like something to make it better, though. And that's going to lead me to my next question, though, which I call the raw emotion question, which I ask every single actor and actress I have on the show. And that is, I'm going to put you in a scenario right now, Mr. Nemec. Say that you are doing a scene with a co-star. And in this scene, this particular scene calls for you two to get into a very like an altercation, like a very heated altercation. And the co-star comes up to you and says, "Mr. Nemec," and he calls you Mr. Nemec because he respects you in the whole wide world. He says, "I have an idea where we could make it where in this scene, where we can not only enhance it to make it where it's believable to the audience at whole, but we can also sell the story so that way we can make more episodes out of it. But where you can lambast me so hard that you can make me cry on command, like you make me cry in frustration." Like, if you were approached with this type of method, though, what would you say that said a co-star, and what would your reaction be?
If you mean off camera, like, do you mean like
off camera? If somebody approached you, like your co-star said, "Mr. Nemec, I had an idea where we can really enhance the scene in which you lambast me so hard that I can actually get frustration."
All I would have to say is, look me in the eye. You, my friend, are a terrible actor. And that would be it. They would break down in tears immediately, right on the spot. It would be over. They probably wouldn't be able to act for the rest of the day. No, I would never do that. For me, the off-camera relationship with other actors, especially when you're doing touchy scenes like that, is extremely important, because if both of the actors aren't on the same page during an intense moment, it can potentially be a recipe for disaster, not necessarily disaster on camera, but a recipe for disaster off camera. For instance, when I did both of the movies, Richard Speck and Ted Bundy, American Icon, playing these horrific serial killer murderers, who I had some really tough scenes with the actresses where I had to be violent, I had to be aggressive, all of this stuff. I would take them aside way ahead of time, have a really natural, organic conversation with them, explain to them what I'm going to do. If at any moment, you're not feeling comfortable, just let it be known. We'll stop filming right away. You know what I mean? This is how far that I'm going to push the scene. I'm not going to go further than this type of behavior and activity and all of that, and really make sure that both of us are on the same page when we're doing scenes like that, because there are actors out there who desire to provoke a reaction from their co-star, from the person they're acting with, by doing something that person is not prepared for. And although it may work good on camera, the director may be happy with and all of that, the off-screen effect that can have on someone can be very bad, and it's so unprofessional to do anything like that. I've always remained extremely professional when it comes to the actor relationship on and off set.
Very fair to say. And if you and I were doing a scene too, and we talked about this prior to the thing, that what we're gonna do though, and I did the scene, like afterwards, I would be the type of actor that would approach you, Mr. Nemec, and say, after all that lambast, I'd be like, Mr. Nemec, I know we talked about this, but I'm so sorry about those things. That's not me. That would be me after we just do that scene. I would feel so bad about like that. Like I'm that type of person that has a bad guilty conscience like that. Where like even if it's like a character wise, like if I would have lambast you horribly on screen, Corin, off screen, I would be like, I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry. Like I would be very apologetic.
Yeah, I dig it, man. That's super pro of you as well. I've never had, not that I recall, I don't think I've had any real moments where I've had to apologize for anything, but I always will make sure that everybody's cool and everything's kosher, and we're all jibing on the same stage, and you know what I mean? And that's very important to me, because if you go into a scene, especially like on the Ted Bundy and the Richard Speck, two of the darker roles that I've ever done, which those scenes can be very traumatic to another actor when you're doing them. And if there's not that setup beforehand of like, listen, this is what's going to happen, this is what I'm going to do, this is as far as I'm going to take it, just so you know, if you're not comfortable at any given moment while we're filming, just say stop. You know what I mean? We'll stop, we'll regroup, we'll figure it out. And then I'll wrap that up at the end by just making sure, okay, are you cool? Everything's fine? Yeah. And I'll break character, because I was never a method actor in the sense that I stayed in the character, the whole time. It's not necessary. That's not how I was trained. I was trained to put the mask on and take the mask off. And so to be able to break character, let them see the real me, that I'm totally cool, everything's fine, smile, let them know like I'm not Ted Bundy, you know what I mean, that's is very beneficial to the work environment and the overall vibe on set, because the show must go on, and you don't want anybody disgruntled or feeling upset about it, or anything else for that matter. And I don't want anybody going out there into the real world saying, oh, this guy's a psychopath to work with. He not only scared me before the scene, he scared me during the scene and after the scene. It's not how I want to be represented out there.
Of course, and never, you always got to protect your reputation, of course. And I wanted to ask you too, Corin, we have a couple more questions before we wrap up too. And first of all, I just want to say before we get to the questions, like how much, we've gone through this interview, and like how much I was always a fan of yours, and talking to you right now, I feel like that kid again, just watching Parker Lewis. And I always said this before, like in my Mount Rushmore of 90s actors, you would be one of the four in that thing, along with Alfonso Ribeiro would be in there, David Faustino would be in there, and because I'm a big fan of his, Luke Perry.
Oh, nice, man. That's a great Mount Rushmore.
God,
Mount Crushmore. Mount Crushmore.
I mean, you guys were the personification of just awesome '90s badass, sitcoms. I mean, Luke Perry with 90210. Like you guys were.
Oh yeah.
Like Alfonso Ribeiro with Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, yourself with Parker Lewis, David Faustino with Married with Children. You guys were dominating the late '80s, early '90s, and that's why you definitely earned the title of legendary actor and '90s icon.
Thanks, brother.
Anytime. And before I get to my final questions, though, my co-hosts have their final questions. Miss Divine, your final question for Mr. Nemec.
All right. What was it like working on Supernatural, and how did you prepare for your role as Christian Campbell?
Yes. The Christian Campbell role was very well written. I have to give it to the writers. They didn't give me any inkling that I was going to turn out to be a demon. So I didn't know ahead of time that was the direction the character was going to go in, which actually was quite a benefit, because I may have made, even though people thought that Christian Campbell was kind of a dark character and was a little, maybe a little slightly untrustworthy, I felt like he was waiting for the Winchesters to prove themselves to him. You know what I mean? And so there was kind of this, this suspicion between all the parties, against each other, and and playing a demon hunter, I felt that it was also important to have this darker edge and this real grounded sense of ballsiness, so to speak, to the character, that he's not afraid. He's not afraid of the Winchesters. He's not afraid of demons. He's like, whatever, bring it on. And it was kind of cool that they didn't let me know that my character was a demon until that particular script came out, because had I known my character was a demon the whole time in hiding, I may have made different character choices. You know what I mean? So I was actually really, really happy with the fact that they kept that hidden even from me, because I was just playing this guy as, someone with really nothing to hide, but playing sort of, suspicious as well, because I'm suspicious of them, So to me, that was a really cool role to play. It fed right into the whole convention circuit and getting to travel and getting to go to some great places and meet some incredible people and see places that I never thought that I would get to see. And the brothers, both of them, they were just such nice, giving, welcoming guys on set. They really were. Jared and Jensen both. They really had the same kind of vibe as Richard Dean Anderson. It's not like that they were so concerned with being the stars of their show, and they really wore their fame like a loose fitting shirt. It was like, they were cool about it. It wasn't like a big thing to them. I have worked around some actors who, and I'll leave their names out of it, but some actors who think that they're too cool for school because they're so-called famous, but the one thing is that, fame comes and goes, but your character stays with you, the character, the type of person you really are in life. And I think that's always senior to fame and fortune or anything else. One funny story about those guys is that they had these little miniature racing motorcycles that they had outside of their dressing rooms, outside of their Winnebagos, they had this little area set up, maybe 25 yards, 30 yards from the entrance to the set, to the entrance to the studio, where they did most of their filming. They had a number of sound stages that they filmed on, and from where they had what's called the circus, that's the area where all the Winnebagos sit around, and they had like some fake grass there, and little picket fences and some lounge chairs and all this kind of stuff to make it feel like really, really natural. But they had these silly tiny little motorcycles sitting out in front of their dressing rooms, And when they would get called to set, they would come out of their dressing room, get on these tiny little motorcycles, start them up, and then ride 25 yards to the stage door, and then kick the kickstand down, get off, and go into set. And they would look like the bears at a circus, the bears on bikes at a circus, these giant guys on these tiny little bikes, cruising 25 yards. Like they could have walked there faster. And I just thought that was that was such an entertaining, fun, comedic way to do things, and it created some brevity for everybody. Everybody had a laugh when they would watch that.
Hey, wasn't there a tag team that actually did that?
I don't remember, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Because I think I remember seeing those guys on The Simpsons, and they used to be like a tag team for WWF.
Who's that, Chris?
Yes.
I mean, I was wondering if you would know, because I don't remember.
What was the name of the team?
Yeah, I thought you would know. I don't remember.
I know. I don't know.
Well, yeah, they were like a big biker dudes who were rode
Oh,
in
I talk
on
about the
small
world's
motorcycles.
heaviest twins. Yeah, I know who you talk about. Like,
the world's heaviest twins.
yeah, they're not wrestlers. They were actually in the Guinness.
Yeah, I remember those guys.
And they were on the small motorcycles. Is that what you're talking about, Chris?
I could have sworn
That's
they used to
kinda what it
like
looked
be a
like.
tag team in a wrestling ring.
They were never wrestlers. There were wrestlers that were similar to them. They were like Haystack Calhoun, but not those guys. But yeah, like, and Chris, before you ask your question, you had a fun question that we always ask all our guest stars. Please ask that, because I wanted to ask this question myself to Mr. Nemec, but I'm gonna let you do the honors.
Mr. Nemec, how does it feel to be a legend?
It feels like water on a duck's back. I don't feel any kind of really legendary status. I kind of took myself out of the PR world at a young age, and the red carpet scene, and the People magazine picks and pans, and all of the kind of hoopla that went along with it. Because at a certain point, during third season or so of Parker Lewis, there was a moment I did not that I felt like I was losing, losing myself to the industry, but I felt like I wasn't being portrayed realistically to the world, like who I am as an artist. I always felt like it was kind of a put on. Like if I'd show up to do an interview for one of these teen magazines, they had a bunch of clothes that they wanted me to wear, and they wanted to do my hair in a way that I wouldn't normally wear it, and they want me to pose in ways that I wouldn't normally pose. And when you do the talk shows at nighttime, the nighttime talk shows, the daytime talk shows, they would do a pre-interview, and they would kind of stage the whole interview and create some kind of anecdotal moment and do these, so you always, it was all a put on, the whole thing was a put on. And that was never why I started acting. And I just felt like, that's not, and I probably hurt some of that so-called legendary status by, extricating myself from that whole side of the film industry, the promotional side of it. I just was not a good self-promoter. I had other friends who were excellent at it, but myself, it didn't, it just didn't excite me. So I would say that's very kind of you to say, and I will accept it.
So while you were doing Starving, back then I sort of had my own vision of like what you and David could also work on, and now that we're finally seeing a animated revival of Married with Children, it kind of got me also thinking, like, why not use this idea? Why not have a Parker Lewis and Married with Children and crossover revival?
How do we not have that?
Well, he was in an episode of Parker Lewis that Miss Musso had given him detention, and he didn't even go to our school.
Yep, wearing a Polk High shirt, and and that kind of just like gave me also a further idea of like, why couldn't the Married with Children and Parker Lewis universes be like intertwined?
Why couldn't we have like a two-part episode? Like one episode leads to another show. Like what we have you appearing in Married with Children at the 8 o'clock slot, and then 8:30, David's appearing on Parker Lewis.
That would have been rad, man. I would have loved it. That would have been great. I did do 4 episodes of 90210.
But this idea I had here was that you would play the Jefferson adjacent style neighbor of Bud, and Bud himself is unhappily married, is sort of mirroring his father's legacy, and you would sort of be I guess, somewhat wacky but lovable neighbor who gets him in and out of trouble. And we could also use your idea that you also had about like Limmer's future of being first a Marine and then turns into a Russian prime minister or a Russian high official politician or something like that.
Well, if I played Faustino's neighbor, it would, part of the storyline would have to be that I won the mega bucks lottery. You know what I mean? That I was just filthy rich, had all this money, and didn't have to work for it. You know, and it would just, that would be perfect to be the the neighbor that won the lottery right next to David with all the toys, all the things that he wants, and not a care in the world. It would be pretty hilarious. Well, I would like to win the lottery.
Be sweet.
I think that could work. And hey, you're a director, you're a writer. I say make it happen. I don't mind using my idea.
Yeah, me and David, we had a lot of fun working together over the years. I'm actually working on a new series now. I can't talk about the how it takes place, but I'm looking for David to be attached to that. I have Vanessa Angel attached to it already, and I'm looking to get Brian Green attached to it. All of them are good friends of mine, and it's a half-hour comedy, but it's kind of along the vibe of The Office, but takes place in a totally different type of scenario. So I'm in the process of writing all of the first season episodes for that, and we're putting together our pitch deck and our budget and everything. So I'm really hoping to get that off the ground as soon as possible. But David and I, we produced a number of films together over the years and acted together. Killer Bud was one, and RoboDoc, that was a National Lampoon movie that we did together, was another one. And High Hopes with Danny Trejo and Jason Mewes was another one. That was a fun one. And gosh, what else did we do together? Well, we just did another film together that it's out in Germany called The Kid Detectives, and it's a kids movie comedy that hopefully will be coming out here in the U.S. pretty soon. But yeah, he's a great dude, very good friend of mine, and I'll see if I can do anything to bend his ear about coming on the show for you. But he's a tough one to get on the phone, I can assure you. Even if I've known him since 1986, and he's tough to get on the phone.
That'd be cool to get him on. We welcome anybody though. Like we welcome any actors. We are huge.
Yeah, I can turn you guys. I'll turn you guys on to some of the other Parker Lewis actors for sure.
Awesome. And I had two quick questions before we wrap up here. First of all, Mr. Nemec, you have a jack of all trades. Like I mentioned before, you have done acting, producing, writing, photography. Out of all of those, or as much as like of everything you've done,
and a graffiti artist,
and yeah, of course, a graffiti artist. Let's not forget that. Out of all the ones I just mentioned, which was your favorite to do?
In all honesty, I've always, graffiti art was my very first passion. I started doing graffiti art when I was 10 years old, and started acting professionally when I was just turned 12. So I'd already been into the graffiti art and kind of breakdancing scene for a couple of years previous to that. And it was something that I continued doing the whole time that I was working as a professional actor. I never stopped painting and stuff. So it was kind of like having this Batman and Bruce Wayne lifestyle where, by daytime I was, Corin Nemec, this Hollywood young actor, and at nighttime I was out doing graffiti and hanging out with my graffiti buddies and stuff. David Arquette was one of them. He was an old school graffiti writer from LA back in the day. That's how we met when we were teenagers too. But If if graffiti art was a survivable outlet for me at a younger age, if I could have figured out a way to make a career out of that, I would have been totally stoked doing that. But acting is absolutely one of my all-time deepest passions. I feel more comfortable in my skin and more comfortable in life when I'm on set than I do at any other time. It's quite an extraordinary experience, when I book a gig and when I get on set, when I get to my trailer, I suddenly feel like, oh, finally I'm home. It's very interesting.
You've also done stage work too.
Stage work some. I had a great time working in theater company in acting workshops. That's how I first started acting, was at a place called Center Stage LA in Los Angeles. That was, the artistic director was Kevin McDermott, and I worked with a wonderful acting teacher named John Lenn for a while, and Terrence Hines and Larry Moss. But then I started working with an acting teacher named Manu Tupou at the American Repertory Company about a year after Parker Lewis wrapped up. And I felt, because I had been in acting classes for so many years leading up to that, and I was in Larry Moss's class for the first year and a half of working on Parker Lewis, year and change, and I had so little time to focus on doing any work in the class, to really prepare something and really put some solid work up, that I had to just stop going to class. And when Parker Lewis wrapped up, there was something missing. Like, there was just something missing in my soul and in my space. And I know, oddly enough, I couldn't figure out really what it was. And my buddy Ernie Reyes, who was the star on Sidekicks, we became very close friends, still good friends today. And he had started studying with Manu Tupou months, like 8 months before I ever went in and audited his class. And he kept telling me about it. And I was like, I'm too busy. And he was like, dude, you got to come check out his class. And I was like, all right. Because I was so caught up in, I got to work. I got to get my next job. I got to get my next, gig, that I had forgotten a little bit about what the whole purpose and reason behind it all was. And that's the process of creating a character, developing a character, and bringing the character to life on a stage. And so I went and audited the class, and this teacher, Manu Tupou, I got to tell you, I mean, that's what my book, Creating a Character for the Stage or Life, is all about. It's about his technique, the new era acting technique that I studied there. And I studied with him. At that point, I studied with him all for the next 15 years until he, unfortunately, he was diabetic, and later on in his dotage, his diabetes became so critical that he was not able to teach anymore by around 2005, unfortunately, and he passed away. But from 1994 until 2005, 1993, 94, I studied with him in his class, and he was a life changer for me. He taught a method that was more about living life as an artist as much as it was about creating a character for the stage or film. So it was a fantastic turn of events for me that my good friend Ernie Reyes started studying with him, and that I ended up studying there, because I think if I hadn't started studying with him at that age, my whole entire artistic experience would have been totally diluted and watered down by the business side of it, And I continued, no matter what jobs I got during that time period, whether it was The Stand, whether it was Drop Zone, whether it was Operation Dumbo Drop, whether it was black movie Blackout with Jane Seymour, and many other films and shows that I did during the time I was studying with him. Even in the lead up to getting Stargate, I was still studying with him at that point. And every time I was able to be back in LA, I'd be back in his class every single Wednesday night, no matter what. And we did a couple of cool things together. We had like a dramatic improv class that we produced together that took improvisational games, but flipped them on their head and had you perform the improvs dramatically instead of comedically. And that was very interesting. That was a very interesting experiment. But just a wonderful, wonderful teacher.
Wow.
Yeah. And I named my son's middle name is Manu. So Lucas Manu Nemec. So I got to carry, and he was born my son was born in 2005, the same year that Manu unfortunately passed away. So it was very important for me to, to dedicate, to make a dedication to him in that way, where at least his name would live on in some sense.
A very touching tribute.
Yeah, totally.
And I have to ask you too, what do you think of the impact? You've had such an amazing career over the years as an actor, as a producer, as a writer, as a graffiti artist. What do you think of the impact that Parker Lewis Can't Lose has caused on many generational fans, both old and new fans, 34 years after its initial release?
It's one of those shows that it deserves a place in pop culture history that it hasn't really gotten, because we only did 78 episodes, and the minimum amount of episodes for general syndication is 88 episodes. So we were 10 episodes away from hitting that target mark where the show would have been picked up and played, because it did get picked up by USA Network right after we went out of production, and they pretty much ran all 3 seasons back to back on like a Saturday or something, and then it disappeared from American television until whatever it was, 8 or so years ago, when Sony put it on Crackle for a while, and then they had it on that platform. But that platform isn't highly trafficked enough, and it really hasn't found its way back into onto U.S. television. But over in Europe, it was much more successful. It played in rotation for several generations. So oddly enough, when I go over to France or Germany or other places in Europe, it's a multi-generational fan base rather than just the Gen Xer fan base.
So cool. And I still remember too when and I was so bummed out, like when Fox stopped, for a short time they stopped airing Married with Children, Parker Lewis and Herman's Head, and then later on in the early 2000s, FX started airing all these shows like Married with Children, Parker Lewis, Herman's Head, etc. And
FX didn't air. They didn't air Parker Lewis.
Not FX. I'm sorry. Wasn't it FXX?
No, Parker Lewis never showed anywhere.
USA, pardon me. USA.
Yeah, USA showed it, but that was literally in the mid 90s. That was like from 94 to 95 or whatever, and then it was gone. They ran every episode, and then it was gone, So it was short lived on USA, and then it never ended up anywhere else. I mean, it could have played on Cartoon Network. It could have played on, even though it's not a cartoon, it still could have played on there. It could have played on Adult Swim. It could have played on FX, like you said, as a rerun. It could have played on a number of networks, but I don't know. I don't know. It's a lost gem, and there is a really cool Instagram site that's dedicated to Parker Lewis called Synchronize This or something like that. But if anybody follows me on Instagram, my Instagram handle is the letter I, the letter M, and then my name, Corin Nemec. So I'm Corin Nemec, and that's the same on Facebook. It's the same on X. And if you are interested in my graffiti art, I haven't been doing a lot recently, but that handle is at the169, and that's just the word THE, and then the numbers 16 and 9, the169 on Instagram. If anybody wants to check out my paintings and street art. And then as far as any writing stuff I've done, they have to go to lulu.com. That's LULU.com. And on there I have the book you spoke of, and then I have another novella that I wrote under my birth name, Joseph C. Nemec, the fourth. It's called Venice High. If you just look up Venice High, that will come up. It's a novella about my kind of loosely based on my life growing up as a graffiti artist in LA. And then I have 3 books of poetry on there, and a bunch of screenplays that I've written that have yet to be produced. And I figured, why not just publish them and let people check them out, for fun if they want. So there's probably like 11 or 12 screenplays there that are pretty fun to read. And I did all the cover art design for them. They're hardback, hardback bound and all that, glossy covers and everything. So they're pretty cool to have.
You pretty much answered my very final question too, which was what's next for Corin Nemec. And you talked about like that, but if you have any more projects or anything, please, I'm giving you the proverbial microphone. Please, the floor is yours, Mr. Nemec.
Yeah, man. I have the ones I talked about, I Feel Fine and Place of Bones and Deadly Justice are all out now. I got one called well, there's The Kid Detectives, and then there is Joe Baby, which is another film. Harvey Keitel, Ron Perlman have a nice little role in that. Deacon Lockman is the star in that. And I just finished another film called Myra that will be coming out later this year, playing an assassin. And hold on, my son's calling me. Let me tell him I'll call him right back. And then I have another film that came out not that long ago called oh my gosh, why am I the name of it is slipping my mind. I'm brain farting. A lot of projects. If you go to imdb.com and look up Corin Nemec, you'll see a whole list of them. But I have a number of projects in development as well that I'm very excited about. One is a mockumentary that we're putting together, our production team right now, and have a story already written out for that. I can't really say what that's about too, because it's such a clever idea. Some bastard would steal it in a New York second. But so we're doing a fun mockumentary, comedy horror, and then I have this half-hour comedy, and I have a number of feature film projects that I've written, some historical stuff that are out to different production companies right now, and hoping to get one of those off the ground this year as well.
Beautiful, sir. Just so cool, and we support you so much. And we have our final comments before we leave. And Jesse, you're going to start your final comment for Mr. Nemec.
All right. Thanks for making Petey and Chris feel like they're kids again, and being a legend for all the other 90s fans out there.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Chris.
Cheers.
Your final comments for Mr. Nemec.
Thanks for being part of my childhood. And you, sir, were part of the show that was essentially quintessential to the transition from the 80s to the 90s. And I definitely hope that whatever comes your way is always going to be blessed.
Thanks, brother. You can't lose, by the way. You can't lose.
No.
I remember the name of the
I've
movie
taken
now.
way
It's
too many
Day
L's in
Labor.
my life Unfortunately, though, I myself have taken way too many L's in life to really say that I can't.
I love it, man.
My final comment before we wrap up, sir, is that first of all, thank you for an amazing interview. You are not only thank you for an amazing interview, excuse me, thank you for not only an amazing interview, but those childhood memories you gave myself and Chris growing up. And this is where Chris and I, like in the show, we usually like debate like this things. He thinks I sound like a broken record when I say it like this, but I like to think of it, and you should know this too, Corin, because it's 90s. I like to think of it as a catchphrase, and that is, Mr. Nemec, you have this incredible gift that you could take a 34-year-old fan right here and bring him way down here and make him feel like that little kid again watching Walker Lewis Can't Lose. That's the kind of incredible gift you have, sir. And I would love to have you on for part 2 in the future for an interview, because you're just such a wonderful man. I'm actually going to paraphrase what one of the podcast host said to you in a previous interviews, and that is, you are a wonderful man, stay that way. And I'm going to say this to continue what they said, and that is, if saints could walk God's greenest pasteurized earth, that would explain Mr. Nemec right here.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it, man, and I'll make sure that I send out the info on this interview to the fans I got out there on X and on Twitter and on X, on IG, and on Facebook as well. We'll make sure we get that out there.
Excellent. I'm going to send you a copy of this link as soon as it's done. I'm going to edit it, so it's either going to be available. Huh?
You said beautiful.
Oh,
Beautiful.
it's gonna either be available either tonight or tomorrow. I'm gonna get right on it as soon as we're done with this interview. But before we wrap up, last thing I'm gonna do, and you deserve this. I waited since we were a kid to do this, and that is thank you, Corin.
Thank you, Corin.
Thank you, Corin.
Thank you, Corin.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Corin.
I cannot wait for part 2 in the future, sir.
You bet, brother. We'll
Have a
do
great
it.
day, everyone.
Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.